Welcome to On the Entrepreneur's Journey, the show where we explore how founders and leaders build companies that scale, evolve, and eventually run without them. I'm Peter Santry, a Summit OS business leadership team guide, and I help leadership teams install the structure, systems, and accountability they need to grow with less chaos and increase their company's value. Today's guest is Alex Allen, Chief Operating Officer of James Skinner Baking Company. Alex's path is one of the most unconventionally featured, from MIT's nuclear reactor lab to serving as an officer in the US Navy to becoming the person companies call when their manufacturing operations are broken and need to be fixed. Alex applies engineering discipline to human systems. He's built his career taking struggling plants and teams, diagnosing the real constraints, and rebuilding them into high-performing operations. In this episode, we talk about how he drives accountability, leads transformation, and builds organizations that actually work. So, welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks, Peter. Happy to be here.
Good. Well, let's get right to it. I love background. I love the military background. And you basically, what drew you? You had a background in from engineering from MIT. What took you into the Navy, which was your first stop, and then ultimately into operations and leadership?
I grew up in a small town in Vermont, which, on some level is like a pre-radical state, where, all of sort of a lot of fringe ideas came from there early and
Yeah.
surrounded by people who, big corporations are poisoning us and, food has all these issues and big corporations have all these issues and they're full of greed. And instead of protesting, I decided, you know what, I am going to go be a leader and I'm going to go into that space and figure out how to help them actually be better and be more caring and, you know, and put my money where my mouth is. And so that, and I also like to work with my hands. I grew up on a farm, so that like it was like I know I want to do something that is hands-on, manufacturing based, and
Mm-hmm.
also be a leader in that group to sort of help in whatever way I can make things better. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I think, I kind of ended up in food out of the Navy because of I was interviewing in oil companies and medical companies, and I went to a cargo plant and it smelled like being on the farm, and I was like, this is comfortable. All right, this is the kind of factory that where I can dig in. Um, and then as you get into things, you realize that even the smallest food plant touches millions and millions of lives, right? That you make several 100,000 pieces of food, bread, candy, glasses of milk. Those are going into people's homes. People are eating that, and so being part of trying to make America's food safer, healthier, better requires people to go in the plants and lead. And so that's really been my altruistic mission is how to help Americans have better lives through better food manufacturing.
Yeah, and that's funny. Your description of Vermont is right on. I mean, it's a very much has that altruistic streak, and you took that and said, well, I'm going to work with it as opposed to try to tear it down, which some of the people from the great state tend to want to do.
Right.
Um, that's good. So you move forward, you decide you want to get into food and operations, specifically working with your hands, so to speak, in terms of just building stuff. But you have to build things through people, and you have to
Yeah.
lead people. And so how did your experiences in the Navy inform you on how to deal with the plant issues that you encountered as you took these roles on?
Yeah, that was one of the specific reasons I joined the Navy. I mean, you always join the Navy for the food, and then second to see the world.
Yeah, yeah.
But third specifically as an officer was to learn leadership. Like what is that from a practical standpoint? I think you can kind of fall into it. As captain of sports teams, I was, a supervisor, and like you kind of like you can be promoted into being a boss through just sort of hard work. but I knew that there's got to be a thought out process. And the thing about the military is the entire thing is a thought out people management leadership control process. And so as you go through as an officer, there's plenty of people who just do it, and then they just learn you do these things, and then those things make you a leader. But I was also curious around how the sausage is made, right? We get it. These are the things that leaders do, command presence and authority and action plans and like accountability and follow up. But what is the system behind the system? And so I read pretty much every leadership book I could find in the military, outside the military, and did a lot of comparing, like of notes. Like you can walk into a situation, be a leader, and make it better, but then there's also how do you change the system so that the system is more people centric. Um,
So you took kind of a combined approach of getting exposed to it in officer and in your officer training, but also you took at it from a theoretical or an analytical approach where you actually took on and read a lot of books and actually studied the leadership concept and approached it that way as well. So you did some
yeah.
supplemental work. Yeah.
So I'm sitting there on the floor pushing because my uniform was, a nasty candidate, right? I didn't know how to dress at officer candidate school. And while I'm pushing one, I'm getting my discipline and learning how to stand up straight and have my uniform. But then I'm also thinking in my head, why do they do this? There's no corporation that makes you, do push-ups because your uniform's not straight, but the military is a massive people organization. You know, what is the lesson here? What is going on? Somebody has created this system and the system works. So you can take
Right.
any person off the street, you run them through boot camp, and then they are a soldier, sailor, airman within a very rapid amount of time. And so learning how through doing of seeing it, and then also there's a science to this thing. And while I was going through it, there was a bit of well, one, there, the Iraq War, enduring war on freedom, all that stuff was going on, so they were trying to pull in people like crazy. But in the background, you had society changing, the no bowling, no hazing, that kind of stuff. And then the cost of recruiting was way up, and so there was a big push around um, getting people through these schools without hurting them. And, and while we were going through the school is also trying new tactics. How do we get the brain change without, torn ACLs, and they were shutting
Right.
down ropes courses, and you weren't jumping off high dives anymore, and it's kind of seeing them how they did that change was impactful.
Hmm. That may be going back in some ways today.
Yeah.
So now a lot of the situations that you've been put in terms of your career have been, fixing plants and certainly improving them. That was a common denominator. In some cases, fixing broken plants and underperforming teams. So when you come into a new situation, like you did with James Skinner, but I'm sure before it, what is it that you look for as you survey the situation? How do you go about doing it? Do you have preconceived notions, or do you listen, or what's your method of approaching a new situation where improvement's needed?
Yeah, I really am doing two paths in parallel. So, yeah, there's a lot of like discipline and systems out there to say, hey, we're going to evaluate this equipment, this production line, this process. And, you measure your inputs, you measure your outputs, you flow chart it out. What are the pieces that are getting worked on, which aren't?
Yeah.
I take that and I apply that to the people processes, right? Like who is in what position? Are they an effective manager, supervisor? How does their effectiveness cause others? And try to map out, there's a lot of people who map out like the process of work, but I map out the people doing the work as if they are equipment. So is this person reliable? Are they consistently performing work? Or are they over here and they're performing a bunch of work, but that work is not value added? And if I can get them in, so there's like that process mapping. but then
Hmm.
there's also that military like reverse boot camping. Like I'm gonna put the whole factory essentially through boot camp. Make sure everybody has a clear expectation of what is the mission of the entity, what is their specific job and role, what is their chain of command, what is their so that they understand like, well, that person has control and authority in this situation, but you have control and authority in this situation, and so this is a joint effort where you're talking to each other, but they're making this decision. You know, maybe they're the medic and they're deciding how to dress the wound, and you're the sniper, and then the other guy is the shots caller and deciding where to put the bullets. The shot,
Hmm.
the shooter shoots where he tells him to because he can see better. Like it's that sort of like interplay of the people and the discipline and adding that structure while
Hmm.
also figuring out the flow and how the system should be designed. What people should we have? Where should they be sitting? And then sort of marrying those two efforts into each other.
Right. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, it's the process and what are the process that you need to do to become successful, and then overlaying the people and sort of who's doing what, who's reporting to whom, what does good look like in each of the seats, and then
Yep.
kind of putting those people into the functions and then getting it. So it's a very system oriented approach on both fronts.
Yeah.
But um, I guess once you get through with that, it gives you a lot of peace of mind because both of those are, God willing, if it's working and you're going to have a lot smoother process.
Yeah.
That's a lot of structure. And I think it's, people need it, you know,
Yeah.
and
And the tricky part is the people evaluation piece. Um, you have to be a very diligent listener and observer and you have to set aside a lot of do I like this person or not like this person? And then also you have to constantly ask why are they doing what they're doing? So 9 times out of 10 they're doing it that way because that's how they were trained because the system that you're coming in to fix taught them how to do that way. And like coming in from the outside, you go, that doesn't make any sense. Why, this person is not doing it the way that I would expect them to do. Let me get rid of them and hire them, somebody from another company who would do it the way that I would expect from a big food company. But if they've worked there for 20 years, they were trained to do it that way.
right, right.
And so if they're following the system that they know, oh, hey, big points. They know how to follow a system. We're going to change the system. And if they can learn to do it the new system way, they're super valuable because they have all this experience. We just have to change some of their key interactions and behaviors and expectations, and then they'll follow the new system.
Mm.
Um, they may
So
be
let me
that.
ask,
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
let me ask you this. And that's kind of brilliant. But how does culture fit into this? You know, you're obviously trying to get results, but you also have a team. They have to work together. Do you do the companies you come into, do they generally have a culture that's actually permeates all the way down to the factory floor, or is it something that's kind of left up high on the walls that nobody pays attention to? Or have you had different experiences, and how important is that for your process to work?
There's usually at least three distinct cultures. There's the hourly worker on the floor. They're gonna have a lived experience in the break room, punching in, kind of doing their job, getting paying benefits, and um they're a little bit more transactional. If the building next to them puts up a sign $2 more than what they're gonna pay, they're gonna walk over and apply. Like for a lot of them, or like, if your overtime changes a little bit, they might be in or out. So the but at the same time, they also want the steadiness and sort of that routine, and they're also local. Like your hourly people are not like applying on LinkedIn and like moving to another state.
Right.
So they have the most vested interest in that place actually being a good place to work where they can stay for a long time. because they will, their promotions are going to be based on demonstrated ability and behavior, and they want to get to supervisor, but they don't necessarily have a lot of exposure to the corporate politics or anything like that. So they have a very like black and white, like
Hmm.
what they see is what they get kind of culture. But then you've got the supervisors and managers that are stuck in both worlds. And so then they have a culture that tends to be sort of the best average of the whole company culture. So if your managers and supervisors are like confused and they love, one way or the other, they see the corporate office culture and they see the other culture. And so how they are plays a lot. And then you have your corporate culture. So if your corporate culture is totally disconnected from your hourly culture, the people in the middle are just they're pulled in two directions and they're just not loving life.
Right, right. So the behaviors and all that stuff set by corporate don't necessarily get all the way down. It sounds like through at least to that middle management layer to the people who are hourly in terms of what they do.
Yeah, and if your corporate culture, the bosses that are in charge have some image of what they want the company to be or what they think the product is or what the customers are. The supervisors who are like that next level down to managers, they kind of see a lot of reality. And
Yeah,
what happens a lot over time is they want to please the bosses, but they have to deal with reality. And so they end up sort of lying a lot. Like they do a
yeah,
lot of like covering up and or
right.
lying or just nodding their head and saying, yes, boss, you're right. And then they go to the floor and just they do something totally different because they're surviving and they're stuck in this sort of middle ground. And so a lot of quick wins are just getting into a place and just saying, all right, guys, you're in the middle. What are the things that are totally out of alignment that we just need to fix right away? And they will tell you, like, we need this, we need this, we need this. Okay, here's these things. And having them just a little bit more bought in and say, hey, I'm being supported a little bit better, everybody on the floor will notice. And so the whole culture from them down, uh, will improve. Like there's hope, even though there's change, they're seeing that, well, there's change and some people may not be here anymore, but the ones who stay see I'm supported, I'm recognized, I'm empowered,
I'm listened to.
I'm listened
I'm
to.
actually, yeah, I'm actually able to weigh in on things that I know about, and I'm listened to, and it comes back, and they try to solve the problems, and yeah, it's amazing what happens when people get listened to, even if their ideas aren't adopted. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, so
Or at least given a valid explanation, like, oh, I hear you, but we
yeah,
can't do that today, but let's think about it.
yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, obviously not everything goes swimmingly and certainly not in a straight line. What have you been your biggest failures or disappointments when you come into a role and you just either took much longer or you just weren't able to get accomplished what you wanted to?
I think the big challenge and blind spot for me is I've spent so much time immersed in this, so that the things that so like people's behaviors are driven by the culture, which is driven by the management systems. And the management systems are how we hire, where the building's located, the products we have, our schedule, like all of the little things that management does drives all of that, which makes total sense to me. And I've spent my whole life obsessed with that. You come into a company and you're just like, try to go do that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all the other leaders in the company have that picture. And so sometimes you start changing management systems to drive the business results that everybody agrees you want, but then they're wondering why you're going after those things. And, and then you can get all sorts of confusion. So I've had plant time. I've had a few instances where I've been brought into companies that got bought by PE, and several key senior managers were still there. And so the performance of the business is the result of them being there for 20 years. The management systems that are driving the current culture and the current business are the guy who, the guy or gal and ladies and that executive team that created all that are still there. And then these new owners come in and put somebody like me in there and they go, well, go get better results. And you walk in, you're like, okay, well, in a normal food plant, we are going to have a pest control program, and we're gonna, you just start rolling out normal things, and then somebody is suddenly like super offended, and you're like, why are you offended that we're doing what is required by the FDA? And they just don't, they've ran the business so long and they've never seen anything else that they think you are just destroying the company that they've spent 20 years building because you're just methodically putting things in the order of a way a normal business would run, and you have no idea that some of those are their sacred cows that they thought was a unique, special way of doing business that made them a better company. And so I've had to learn that if there are leaders like that in place who have that, to talk to them a lot and make sure that they have that conversation around the management system. Um, Having somebody like you involved, I found is also very helpful. Like, came into a company in Ohio that was a candy company. The family name was on the side of the building, and they several siblings, and none of their kids wanted it, so they did a, a managed buyout
Yeah.
where many of them were still there as W-2 employees in the new company, and then some of the siblings so it was like this big complicated buyout program, and the whole place had been ran by sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
And so the PE company was smart enough to say, hey, let's grab traction, EOS, and let's just follow some basic steps of a normal blueprint of a management system, right? And just let's talk about our strategy. Like, yes, you all say, well, we're just doing what dad taught us to do. That's not a great corporate strategy. Well, we need to flesh out that in real human words. And
Yeah.
then as you build that, then it makes it easier for a guy like me to say, okay, you see how we want good quality? That means we need to follow this quality system, which means we're going to look at these risks, and these are things we're doing that are not compliant. And they
Okay.
go, oh, okay, you're helping us do what dad wanted, but for the modern era.
Yeah,
Um,
I find family businesses especially are particularly different because there is a whole dynamic that's happened in the past and outside of the four walls of the business, and they're very much driving the business, and it's hard to cut through that, and it sometimes involves confrontation where um, you have to break glass, and among family members that doesn't necessarily work. So confrontation can be very difficult, and it's just very hard to navigate those dynamics, and an operating system, like Pinnacle or Summit OS, is going to be the way to sort of put everybody back on a sort of even playing field. So I could see how that is.
yeah,
So
it helps take very emotional things and give people a framework to talk about it instead of fighting based on power. It's like, well, no,
yeah.
we can agree on these three pillars, and now we can go under this pillar and add some details in a way where we're not being offensive on purpose for power play. We're sharing and talking. And you can do that at a leadership level, but you can do that at the team level, right? Hey, our team is goal is cleaning the floors. We're gonna figure out when to clean the floors, how to clean the floors. Let's talk about it in a constructive, um, high level down kind of way. Straight out of the military. What's our mission? What's our battle plan? Who's got what? Who's responsible? And it's the same thing you do in engineering, right? What is the problem we're solving? What are the resources? What are our inputs? What are our outputs? How do we maximize efficiency? It's like
So
very systematic way.
you step out of the plant manager role, and now you become a COO, and you obviously have a higher level of thinking, and specifically I'm talking about now, in your role at James Skinner Baking, where you come in, PE's bought the company, they're replacing the upper levels of management, you show up, and on the same day that the CEO shows up, and you might have met each other briefly in passing when you were both interviewing, but how did you, and this was also a little bit of a turnaround, or at least it was certainly an improvement situation. how did that all happen? Because you're thrown in together. You really didn't know each other. One didn't hire the other, and you have different skills. How did you split the world in that sort of that C-suite where the CEO, COO? That must have been a very interesting dynamic on how you guys worked that out.
I think it helps that we have different backgrounds in our we were open about that. Like he came from the same food industry, but came up through sales and marketing and got through leadership through sales and marketing leadership versus on the floor wearing boots. And so um I think everybody feels like they can have input on the floor and everybody can also feel like they have input in sales. So I try to be very specific around I am not going to have input on people, on products, marketing, sales, and that effort. Like that is yours. And then inside the factory is mine. So we can like stay as far out of each other's sandboxes as we can to avoid that sort of like power dynamic.
Right.
But then some of our early stumbles were he said he's coming from he's done high performance work teams before. And awesome. I have also been trained on how to install high performance work teams. And so like as we started to get through it, I was like, what I'm talking about is different than you're talking about.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me what you think a high performance work team is? And then, you know, his was more the pinnacle structure, like having a strategy and having that, and mine was more the more how to build esprit de corps within a team. They both kind of get there, but one gets there through, personality and interplay and stuff. And so I was like, okay, we're using the same words to mean two different things.
Right. 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 Right.
And how to peel that onion back. And we're still kind of learning through it. And I think the biggest feedback we get is from the people who didn't join with us, and they're like, we were here, we had different owners, and then we had some interim chief executive suites, and now we have you guys, and we've just been tossed back and forth all over the place. So I
Yeah.
think we don't notice that as much as the people around us notice that they got a double. And there was really a chief commercial officer started the same day too, so they got a triple shotgun blast of new leadership injected into the company.
Right. Right. So how did you? So you're working out your own dynamics between you, the three of you, and then you have to roll it out to the team and sort of make sure that they're on board with whatever you decide. And I just, when you change all things at once, it must have just been. I can just imagine the chaos as you were learning on the go. Usually, a CEO will hire a COO or something like that, and we'll have a job description that he or she wants for that role to complement what they do so that you can have
Yeah.
this nice dynamic in the C-suite where the important functions are being handled by people who have the right, right people, right seats, doing what they do best and what they like to do and give them energy and all that. And I just find it fascinating when people get thrown together and they've got to figure that out on their own. And I'm sure that was very interesting. Um, so um, so let's take a look forward. I mean, you've settled in there. I think you're what, almost a year in, or
Second month. I just
oh,
completed my
second
second month.
month. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Sorry, I misread that. Okay, so you're still ironing these things out.
Yeah.
Have you come up with, what your vision is for the next 2 or 3 years with the company, or is this sort of still triage and trying to figure out, what the next couple quarters look like?
Yeah, we're definitely not in the 3 year plan yet. We had an initial go get from new owners, you know,
Yeah,
get cash flow positive as quickly as possible, kind of thing. And
yeah,
so there was that initial punch. Here's our cash improving plans. Here's the projects. Here's the bang for the buck. Here's when they're going to land. Who's going to take them on? And then we're putting together our, multi-year plan, um, which will be more Skinner specific. But for me, functionally, like, for the food manufacturing ounce is like we're currently in SQF level 2. We're going to get to SQF level 3, which is a very food specific way of saying we're going to go from a compliance based culture to a performance based culture where our quality documentation is instead of being quality control and just documenting in spec out of spec to what are our risks? The operators aren't just being told by quality you're good or bad. The operators are now running their line and controlling their quality. And then quality is there as the assurance body helping them win. Um, so it's a lot of an empowered bottom-up workforce instead of going through reams of paper a day filling out forms. We're going to get it electronically activated and streamlined and data driven and and really make it a place where people come in, they have a clear expectation of their jobs, they have a training program, they have very clear feedback from their manager on here's what you're accountable for, here's how you're doing. They can see their scorecard every single day, and they can just come in and win and take the risk of this out of the business, right? Make the business just steady as a train station where
Yeah.
it delivers on time, on schedule, within plan. And so that way the sales and marketing team can then take what we do and go find where we can do it best in the market.
Yeah. It sounds like from a very compliance oriented, almost I'm going to use the wrong word here, but it's kind of like compliance being sort of a policeman of your output versus a partner to help you make the quality better, and as opposed to just measuring, whether you're in compliance, which, it's more of a partnering versus a policeman. I've lived that myself,
Yeah.
and in finance, I've seen both sides of that, where that goes.
And for everybody in the building, the oven operator, the mixer, while their normal job doesn't change essentially from day to day, they are now expected to have input, to talk, to work with R&D, to be part of new recipe development, to be able to put in a work order. Like, so it takes them from, hey, I'm just a guy punching my ticket to, no, I am the best, muffin batter mixer in Omaha right here.
Right,
So
right.
now they've got some pride, they've got the documentation to prove it, and it elevates that entire culture.
So we
And
haven't gotten into it, but give us some examples of what James Skinner Baking does, in terms of the products you have and all that.
the primary thing that we do better than probably everybody is we do what your local baker might do at scale. So cheese, strip danishes, and braids and bear claws, a lot of those fancy danishes that you would get at your local deli, made by hand, not deli bakery,
Yeah.
made fresh every day that they are doing those by hand. We're doing that essentially at scale. So our lines are a little bit automated, but also very manual. And so when people come in, they're like, "Oh my goodness, you are literally making your bread by hand." Yes, we have some machines doing it, but a lot of the things we're doing are done manually. And so then those are sold nationwide in grocery and retail chains. And some of them under our label, but a lot of them under other brands' labels. And so if you're at a big box store and you're eating a cheese Danish and it tastes like the butter has been folded into the bread and it has real filling and it tastes awesome, probably ours. If it's kind of like dry and bready and tastes kind of fake, it's the other guys.
Right. Right. So you're
Um,
you're white labeling a lot of your stuff, or I should say private labeling, or people are private labeling it,
Yep. And
for
we're still
you.
doing it the artisan bakery way, where we are truly folding the bread in with the butter in it and then twisting it and proofing it, whereas a lot of other places are essentially making bread with butter as an ingredient. So whereas ours is like a folded pastry product, theirs is more of
Mhm.
like a baguette. Like it's just a squirted out piece of bread that has butter in it for flavor, but it doesn't have um that layered part of the dough that just makes it melt in your mouth.
Right, right. Okay. And then, last question is really pertains to, baking is in almost by definition a commodity product, although you're making sort of differentiated. How are you and the private equity firm above you thinking about how you can position yourselves to differentiate and get pricing power and be able to get the profitability that you want?
Yeah, it's two parts. One is, as Skinner kind of did what they did, and 30 years they kind of developed a plant and had all these people who just sort of knew, and they just made great products that were everywhere. But then over time, you add more products and you get complex and you lose track of stuff, and
Hmm.
maybe your operation gets looser. So we're going to get back to really tightly knowing this is the cost of all of these value added things we're doing, and then also get really smart about where do those value added things, um, where does the customer appreciate that? We also make brownies and we make muffins and stuff, and so like we make a cinnamon roll that is sold at scale, and we do a lot of that hand participating stuff to it. Um, but the price per pound that we get for that versus like our Danish is not there, right? So the customer likes our cinnamon rolls, they're buying a lot of them, but the price per pound on that versus the cheese Danish, which at the end of the day has the same ingredients and has the same amount of labor, the customer isn't as appreciative. So we'll focus more on the things where the customer and the market says, no, we are willing to pay more for this superior product than than this other one. It's like what on some level we compete with donuts, right? Like people are
Right.
buying breakfast pastries or desserts or cakes, and so what we do has to be demonstratably better of an eating experience where people say, "Yeah, I'm going to pay extra to get that because it tastes better. It's got real cheese. It's got real fruit. This is a delightful treat versus, I'm just filling my face with morning calories."
Right, right, right. Interesting. And I'm sure the private label versus the branded stuff is kind of a challenge too, to how do you differentiate and get a higher pricing umbrella on your branded stuff. And I'm sure there's a lot to it.
And
But
then probably the other pivot we'll follow is adding healthy components, right? So a lot of people want to enjoy eating, but they want to be healthy about it. And so whereas sort of the normal bread line where you're just kind of like blowing stuff into a pan and baking it, you can't add that much protein or fiber or things like that very
right,
easily. Because of the way we're doing fillings and layering, we have the opportunity to really boost some of those other healthy attributes people want to have in their food. And then with our, fruit and cheese and stuff, you can if you just eat straight fiber and protein, it kind of tastes like mud, right? Like it's not great, but we have an opportunity to really elevate the ability of people to get those healthy ingredients.
yeah.
Um,
I'm sure the food industry is going through a big transition as people really, there's so much focus from the federal government on down and really from the bottom up. It's like processed food, how do we make it so that and actually, addresses nutrition needs and doesn't make everybody obese and all that. And
yeah.
I'm sure you're in the crosshairs of that in a lot of ways. And maybe your manual process allows you to be able to make that transition perhaps more easily than some of the other more automated, less flexible places. And that would be interesting. Well, it's an interesting industry, and I can't wait to hear how where you are in a year, how the leadership team has melded and gelled together, and how the productivity and the profitability has followed. And we want to hear of another success story. But I want to thank you for joining me today, Alex, and telling me
Yeah.
your story. And I think it's one we're going to have to revisit, when you're a little more than 2 months in to see how it's turning out. So
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And
good. And thank you to the audience for joining us today on the entrepreneur's journey.
thank
See
you.
you.
Bye.